Hello, all. Good afternoon, everyone. Here we have Rohan Agarwal, sir, with us, who is the co founder at Cypherock. Now, what Cypherock is, it is a Consensus Ventures backed company which provides secure storage solutions for users' digital assets. It is developing a decentralized recovery system so that you do not have to write the recovery phases on a piece of paper and make it secure. I also greet Gaurav Bansod sir and who is the head of EDC, BIC and SIC, and Ranjit Bidwe sir, coordinator EDC, BIC and SIC. We are glad you are here today. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, Rohan sir, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so thanks for the warm intros, folks. So, everyone, I'm Rohan, co-founder at Cypherock. So, we somewhat started this around 3 years back, and probably in a field that most of India does not work in. To be really honest, I mean, if you see in India generally, things are more gravitated towards mobile applications, websites, stuff like that. But we intended to like kind of change that for the better, and we want that okay, India to be one of those front runners in these fields, which are such as blockchain, hardware, security, and cryptography. Fields that India generally don't work in. We want to be one of the companies who actually try to encourage that sort of industry to really thrive in India, because ultimately, if you see the history of the internet itself, the way US really leapfrogged everyone in terms of both the GDP, in terms of its economy, was due to its strong presence and being an early mover in technology and internet itself, right? And so we feel that that if India needs to be on a global scale, that we have to be an IP driven country where which kind of promotes technology, ventures and experiments, right? So that's the sort of base idea. Again, I don't want to like bore anyone here. That's kind of my fundamental criteria. So if anything that you guys find boring, just point me out. I'll be happy to like skip over those parts. So I'm the co-founder of Cypherock. We generally work around security of your digital assets. So digital assets, in like theory, it's like anything that is digital and has value. So uh, just a few moments around our team. So we are, a team of now 8 people. We have years of experience in blockchain, smart card, cryptography, and hardware security. We are backed by Consensus Labs. So Consensus Labs is a blockchain-based VC firm based in United States of America, and we have received grants from multiple different government organizations such as Sign from IIT Bombay. Then you have Nidhi Priyas Screen through the help of iCreate, and then we're also part of DSCI, which is the Data Security Council of India, as well as we just recently got into India Deep Tech also. So India Deep Tech is sort of an alliance between the different stakeholders who believe in the deep tech vision, and so the VCs that are involved, and then you have the mentors there, plus the other sort of startups from sorry, health tech, med tech, and cybersecurity. We are one of the 9 companies out of India to be part of that alliance. Yeah, so I think it's let's further sort of expand into first what is a digital asset and like how is it sort of different from a physical asset. So just to confirm, like I'm audible, right? Hello.
Yes, you are audible, Rohan.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so we can first start off with like what's a digital asset and like how is it different from a physical asset. So if you see sort of like the history of mankind, since money existed, basically people have been using physical assets to store their value, right? And physical assets, things like cash, gold, real estate, these are all physical assets. So assets that are physical, tangible in nature but has value, right? And that is how humans have usually kept their value over time, right? It's kind of a mechanism to keep value. um But if you see the trend in the last 20 years with the advent of internet, there is more and more value being accrued in digital. So digital assets are anything that is digital and has value. So things like passwords, you have private keys, you have bitcoins, you have anything that is digital and has value. So even if you have your bank password, that protects your money in your account. So inherently that password has value, because if anyone else gets access to that password, they can actually get that value out of that account, right? So anything that's digital and has value is like called digital assets. Now, the major difference between these two assets is, or like the challenge in itself, if we concentrate more around the maintenance, recovery, and inheritance of these physical assets, this is already a standardized process. So let's assume, God forbid, something happens in a family and someone dies. So if there is inheritance involved, so the different jurisdictions around the world have different laws according to how that sort of asset is going to be maintained and then transferred to the next owner or the next in kin. uh, you know um, so if you consider India, so let's assume someone dies and he had a property to his name. So the process is already like well defined and structured in case it gets transferred to someone else. And obviously we can go into different arbitrary sorry, arbitration and everything. There could be legal cases if there's a dispute and everything. But figuratively speaking, most of the things are already sorted out. You have a structure in place of how things needs to be transferred, maintained, recovered, and inherited. And every country has sort of laws around the physical asset inheritance and recovery and everything. But when it comes to digital assets, the thing with this is it's a very fairly new technology, and we don't have that sort of laws, structures, standards, and protocols around how these digital assets are going to be transferred, owned. Eventually owned and inherited. So let's assume, I die tomorrow. Like, how is my Facebook data going to be managed? Who's going to be the rightful owner for that? How are my cryptocurrency is going to be managed, inherited, right? How is my private keys to certain lockers or whatever, what have you, is going to be managed and transferred in inheritance. Those things are not standardized, and don't have like a standard protocol. And the reason is twofold. So number one, it's a fairly new way to kind of maintain value. And then secondly, the reason is, it's very hard to put value on a digital asset. So it's because digital asset itself, it's just bits of information, right? So it could be valuable for someone and could be completely worthless for someone else, right? So, well, how do you actually maintain and inherit digital assets without compromising privacy and control, and do it in a structured way and have a standardized protocol around that? Well, we don't have an answer for this today, but that's where our vision is as a company to like really solve for. So we want to standardize the recovery inheritance of these digital assets over time. And yeah, if you see the trend, more and more value is being accrued from physical assets to digital assets. So it's like, before you used to have physical lockers. Now even those physical lockers, which you might store something valuable in, is sort of being protected by a digital password, and ultimately that sort of value is accrued in the digital asset itself, which is the password, right? So more and more value, as and when there is kind of digitization of every physical thing, more and more value is being accrued in digital assets than ever before. I don't know if you guys follow this news, but there's something of a like a new trend around NFTs. So NFTs are non-fungible tokens, and it's been there for some time, but it has just like started getting the hype right now, and people are using that sort of like digital an NFT as, again, like kind of a cryptocurrency primitive or financial instrument represented through blockchain, which allows you to like define a particular digital art as a one-to-one mapping, right? So what it allows you to do is to have uniqueness attached to a digital asset. So what has happened to that is, like, there's an artist called as Beeple, and he the funny story is he used to draw these digital arts since the last 14-20 years, and recently, because of the NFT phenomenon, his digital art. So a digital art is, again, you can make copies of it and you can distribute it infinitely, but a digital art he had, drawn, just recently got sold for $69 million, right? So that's how, and again, people can argue whether that's legit or not, whether that has value or not, but the market decided that value, and that's what sort of the trend is towards, wherein more and more things go digital and more things value gets stored in digital form. So coming to the next thing, which is Bitcoin in itself. So Bitcoin is sort of like one such digital asset, and that is, has existed since the last like 11 to 12 years. And what I want to talk about here more around like what is sort of like Bitcoin, why does it matter to the society, and what sort of change it's sort of bringing on since the last 11 12 years. So coming to the point number one, which is it's built on Web 3.0 architecture. So um, let's sort of like talk about Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 architecture. So if you see Web 2.0 architecture, I'm sure like most of you already know Web 2.0 architecture, which is like you have a server or the master, and it's, so the basic premise is it works on the master slave architecture. So you have one master, and then you have the different slaves working according to the rules which are set by the master. So if you see human history, like that's pretty much all of the networks architecture today. So if you see internet networks such as Facebook, Google, you have the central organization which is controlling the particular service or application. If you see Google search, so that's controlled by Google. If you see Facebook social network, that's controlled by Facebook, and all of the users are its slaves, right? Similarly, if you see other networks, human networks, like a country, right, a government or a university, so it's always like you have a central organization. So in the country's case, it's the government which is um, sort of controlling the country and sort of makes the rules around the governing of the country, and then the citizens are the slaves. Similarly, if you see the money network, so money network is controlled by RBI, and all of the different citizens who exchange rupees are sort of the slaves of the network. So that's sort of like the Web 2.0 architecture. Now the important point here to note is like what is the problem with that architecture, right? So if we see like the history of internet history, the internet sort of was designed and developed to be decentralized in nature, right? So decentralized is more like you don't have like a central authority, and you have freedom to do whatever you want to do on the internet. But eventually what happened over time was these few behemoths started to like really centralized around their specific use case offering. So you have Amazon, you have Google, you have Facebook, and they sort of like have their own unique perspective and own unique use cases that they offer through their service and application. But what happened with that is over time, when because they become so giant and they have this $1 trillion market caps, what happened is they started to accrue a lot of value, and they sort of how should I say, started to misuse their power. So, if you see Google today, I mean, pretty much every internet user, uses Google today for their search needs. But the thing is, they have their own policies which are more aligned towards their own shareholders rather than their all of the different stakeholders, due to which, you have not favorable consequences for all. So if you see like Google, they have these different policy changes when they can shut down different Gmail accounts, and they do it too often. I mean, if you consider my case, so I am sort of an Android developer by trade, and like I had an app which I developed in college, and that was doing something around 80,000 rupees in net revenue per month while I was still in college, which is good for a side income while you are there in college, right? But again, what happened is, I woke up one day from my sleep, and I get this email from Google saying that my app is no longer compliant with their policies, right? And my revenue that was like 80,000 rupees per month, it got to zero the next day, right? So things like these, again, that was some sort of a side project for me, And again, I was not like kind of not dependent on that sort of money for my livelihood. But think of those people who are in fact dependent on the livelihood of these earnings that they do through these services, and their earnings get shut down the next day and goes to zero just because it goes against the policies of a particular giant, right? So that's sort of like preparing me also to be participating in this new sort of infrastructure that is building around the Web 3.0. So that's sort of Web 3.0 like shortcomings. Even if we talk about I mean the government in general or the RBI in general, if we talk of the money network, we don't know how the money works today, right? I mean it's a completely opaque system. So and if you see money, like it's very hard to define money in general. It's more like it's a language that everyone use for exchanging their financial needs of that sort, right? It's a kind of a medium of exchange for financial needs. But the thing is, for money is something which should be universal, just like language, right? But the thing is, it's not today, right? The RBI decides what needs to be. I mean, how much currency needs to be printed on a given day. What should be the circulating supply? They can print, whatever money that they want. There's no sort of transparency around the money printing. Um, with the rest of the country, and it's a opaque system. Plus, you have failed experiments like demonetization. So demonetization again was like a failed experiment, and I mean it was not something which the citizens wanted in the first place, but it still went through because the government was in favor of that, and ultimately the public paid for that, right? Because crores of rupees had to be spent in order to exchange those old notes with the new ones. So we have these events again and again. I mean, expanding more on the money problem. You have hyperinflation, in countries like Venezuela, wherein the currency is so devalued there because of infinite printing of the currencies by the government that I mean, the citizens have lost faith in their own governments, right? So that's what it is happening. And to be frank, we don't have like sort of a way out of that. So because everything was based on Web 2.0 architecture, which is the master slave architecture, we didn't have a better way to organize a network which is decentralized, which is transparent, number two, and which is not in control of any single authority or party. And that's where the whole idea of Web 3.0 architecture arose, which is like, why don't we have a network which is built, which is sort of decentralized, and I mean the network participants and the slaves, or I should say the clients, like kind of organize between themselves. Why we can't sustain a network without a central authority? So that could sort of become like a major like thought point around having such a network. But the thing was, before Bitcoin, it was not possible to sustain a network because you didn't have that sort of mechanism. So Bitcoin in 2008, something around that, it was the first cryptocurrency which got sort of programmed by anonymous founder. So if you see the net worth of him, with today's Bitcoin's value, his net worth today is $250 billion, and that's a billion with a B. And he's probably the richest person or a group of person today in existence, but we still don't know who he is, the person who actually developed this technology. And it has some really stark differentiating properties. So one was, number one, it was built on Web 3.0 architecture. So Web 3.0, as I said, is his network was the first network which was able to sustain since the last 13 years now without a central authority. So you don't have, there's no RBI, there's no like a Facebook organization or a company controlling Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself is a decentralized architecture. So that's more around like Web 3.0. The second is around digital scarcity. So the second value proposition that Bitcoin enabled was digital scarcity, which is representing scarcity on the internet. So if you see today, everything is sort of abundant on the internet, right? So if you take any file which is like audio, visual, text, you can make infinite copies of that and distribute it to infinite number of people, right? That's how torrent works. That's how, people carry out piracy, or whatever they do. I mean, they copy and do stuff like that. But for money to work, you need to have scarcity. So what do we mean by scarcity is, if I give you 100 rupees, it should be impossible for me to give that same 100 rupees to someone else. That's technically what is termed as double spending problem. You cannot spend that same money to two different people. But in the context of internet, that was not possible, because you can make infinite copies of anything. So if that was a possibility, money couldn't exist before, and anyone could become like a money printing machine, and basically print infinite number of money currency online, and then the value of the money goes to zero. But with Bitcoin, using its unique architecture, what it allowed you to do was, if I'm giving you one Bitcoin digitally, it is impossible for me, or practically impossible for me, to give that same Bitcoin to someone else. And this whole process is still digital. Again, I'm not going to too much detail how that is possible. It's all open. You read it out. But that's what it enabled. It enabled anyone to represent scarcity on the internet. That's the second thing. The third property is more around seizability. So if you see assets of today, you have real estate, stocks, bonds, cash in your account. Everything today is seizable by the government, right? Um, and they have their own rules. I'm not denying that, but the thing is, those rules are sometimes very unjust for some certain number of minority or certain number of people. So for Venezuelans, if you see, for Venezuelans, their assets got seized when they were trying to immigrate into U.S. nation, because they didn't want to stay in Venezuela anymore. And so, if you see the history of how governments have evolved, they first had control over pretty much everything, right? But then and this is specifically around information. So they had control over the spread of information, because they had control over printing press. But then internet came along, and through internet, everyone became basically a free publisher. Everyone can basically are sort of like free to publish anything they want on the internet, and that's how the right to spread of information got sort of separated from the state, which is anyone can spread any sort of information to anyone, and it all becomes like freely available to anyone. And basically the governments lost the control of spread of information, number one. Now with the help of Bitcoin, what is happening is there's a separation of money from the state. So money which is closely guarded and controlled by different governments and different jurisdictions. So you have the government of India controlling the rupees, you have the government of United States of America controlling the US dollar. Bitcoin, because it's decentralized and it's not in control of any central authority, what it's enabling is it's sort of separating money from the state. So the live example of this today is Nigeria. So in Nigeria, more than 30% of citizens today hold and trade Bitcoin, right? So their government has sort of like banned Bitcoin in the country, but that's not stopping the citizens of the country to actually not trade Bitcoin and not use Bitcoin as a currency. The reason for that by the citizens is their Nigerian currency has devalued so much that they are not in favor of using their own currency. They are using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, and that I feel is going to be one of the few starting points for other countries also, because eventually tech always wins, whether someone likes it or not. And this technology, which is Bitcoin itself, is definitely far superior than what we have. And as I said, money is something which should be universal. It should not be in control of anyone, and that will sort of like cater to the biggest wealth transfer that we probably will have ever in the world, and that will be enabled by Bitcoin. And that's why we are so much like in proponent of Bitcoin. So so one thing that I want to do clear out is, like, government today has not banned Bitcoin in India. Bitcoin is not illegal; it's completely legal. But I mean, the rules can change, but the thing is, it's not how should I say, because it's unseizable. And the reason why it's something which I missed out here, why it's unseizable is you can basically store billions of dollars in your brain. That's why it's unseizable. So I'll tell you how. So today what you do is, to store wealth, is you use bank accounts, you use gold, you use real estate. Every those sorts of how should I say, assets are seizable by the government. So the gold can be seized by the government. If you have cash in your house, that can be seized by the government. Banks accounts are all seizable by the government. Real estate are controlled by the government, so they can seize it if they want. But Bitcoin, because it's decentralized, it's the first asset which is unseizable by anyone, not only the government, but anyone. So because it's all digital, you can basically store billions of dollars in your brain, which was not possible, because all you have to do is remember that private key. I'll come to private key in some moments, but private key is anything like which is digital, and you can think of it like a password to your Bitcoin. So because you can store it in your mind, I mean, no one can like really seize billions of, I mean, anything from your brain, right? So that's how it becomes unseizable. And the last is more around, again, extending the point of unseizability around protocol. It's a protocol and not an application. Okay, so just a basic Q&A. Do you guys know the difference between protocol and an application? Hello? Anyone?
No, sir.
Okay, perfect. Not an issue. So protocol is anything like a language. So internet is a protocol. I am communicating with the English. That's also a protocol, because it's a protocol is anything. It's kind of a set of rules for any two parties. That could be computers, that could be humans, to sort of communicate between two entities. But application are something which is built on top of that protocol. So Google, Facebook, these are all applications which are built on top of protocol. So China, if you see the case of China, they have banned Google, Facebook from operating in their countries, but they cannot ban internet because it's a set of rules. It's a violation of fundamental human right, which is like, speech, free speech, just how free speech is. So Bitcoin itself, it's not an application, it's a protocol itself, which sort of operates on top of the internet protocol. And what do I mean by that is, if you want to transfer Bitcoin, there's no sort of like application needed if you want to do so. You can send a Bitcoin transaction to me in a Morse code. You can send it to me in binary code. You can send it to me in English, Chinese, Hindi, whatever you want to send it, and the transaction will still be successful. And so what I mean by that is, even if the government tries to like ban or do whatever, obviously they can ban it, but they won't be able to enforce it, right? They won't be able to actually enforce that sort of ban. And that's kind of the beauty of protocol itself, that you cannot like really uh, you cannot like really enforce the stop of that. And so what I see because of these properties is sort of like Bitcoin is inevitable. Now I don't know the timeline for that, but because it's decentralized and no one is controlling it, like it's inevitable that in some way or the else Bitcoin gets sort of adopted by by the different countries and by the different citizens. And it will eventually sort of like decouple money from the government and the different states. Next is around challenges with these digital assets and like sort of Web 3.0 architecture. So the first is, these are the major security issues. I'm going to focus more around the security issues. So three sort of security issues: in motion, in rest, and in inheritance. So talking about motion, which is when you're using that digital asset, so that could be password, that could be Bitcoin's private key. When you're using that, like you should be able to use it without sort of risk in the digital asset itself being compromised. So you have to secure it against the when you're using that digital asset in motion. The second is around security issues in rest. So in rest, as in when it's there, and even if someone gets hold of that digital asset, like I mean, the mechanism should be set in place such that it's not compromisable in rest. And the third is more around inheritance. Well, if something happens to you, well, how do those digital assets get transferred to the right person and does not get into the hands of the wrong person? So these three are sort of like the digital challenges with digital assets today. um, Concentrating and focusing more specifically around Bitcoin. Yeah, so specifically concentrating more around Bitcoin itself. So the way how the web 2.0 architecture differentiates from the web 3.0 architecture is, you have two things. One is your authorization. The second is around recovery, and recovery and inheritance could be like combined into one thing. So let's assume you have your Facebook account, so you have a username and password for as an identity, as an authentication layer for using that service, right? That's how the web 2.0 works. And in case of recovery, you have a you have a forget password button on your Facebook website, and then you can click that button. The Facebook will send an email to you. You can easily regenerate a password, and you're good to go. And that's how your recovery of your account is done. If let's assume forget the password. But in a web 3.0 architecture, the difference is you don't have a Facebook, you don't have like a central authority for authentication. Well, then how do you manage your Bitcoins? So it uses something called as cryptography. Again, I won't go too much into details, but cryptography, it's a branch of computer science where you use things like encryption, digital signature, stuff like that to manage information security. So in the case of Bitcoins, you basically generate a public key and private key pair. So that generation, it's a mathematical operation. You can do it. So like an account creation, you have to go to the website and create an account. But create an account for a blockchain or a web 3.0 architected system like a Bitcoin, you don't need to go to an account. It's a fundamentally new way of doing things, wherein you can create an account without an internet, right? So all you need to do is like create a public key and private key pair. That public key is sort of like a username, and private key is sort of like a password, right? So that's how the authentication is done. For accessing so if you want to transfer your Bitcoin out, so you use if you want to use spend your Bitcoins, you use that private key. And if you want to receive Bitcoins, you use a public key. So public key is like, as the name suggests, it's out there in the open. You can give it to someone else so that they can send Bitcoins to you. And private key is something which you keep it secret and only use it to spend your Bitcoins. That's how that architecture works. But there are challenges with recovery. So as I said, like there is no central authority, there is no Facebook on a Facebook network, on a Bitcoin network. And I'm audible, right? I'm just want to confirm.
Yes, Rohan, you are audible.
Got it. I just need to reaffirm so that I don't sort of get lost in between, right?
Yeah.
So there are challenges with recovery and sort of backing up with these digital assets. And the reason is there's no Facebook, there is no sort of forget password button. So what do I mean by that is on the Bitcoin network, all you have is your private key. And if you lose that private key, your funds are lost forever. And that's why you constantly hear about this news, which is, okay, so and so folk lost crores of rupees in Bitcoin and he's not able to access it. And the reason for that is those were their lucky events, which is they probably bought Bitcoin 10 years ago. They didn't really care about that much, and 10 years afterwards the value has grown so much that they altogether care about it right now. But because they didn't have proper backup and inheritance procedures set it up, they cannot recover their Bitcoin. So it's like a Facebook account. You can go to Facebook and recover that account for you, but for a Bitcoin network, you cannot go to anyone to recover that account because it's a decentralized network. There's no sort of central authority who governs that network, and there's no sort of central authority who takes care of your account management. You as the user are responsible for managing your own account. So what do I mean by that is, if you lose that private key, which sort of is responsible for your Bitcoins, you lose your funds forever. No one in this world can recover those for you. And that's where the need for secure backup arrives, that you need to have proper backups of those Bitcoin private key so that you don't lose it themselves. But with backup, again, like it's not like you can give it to someone else. So if you give your private keys to someone else, they might steal the Bitcoins themselves, right? And two fundamental differences between the networks I should definitely point out here is, so let's assume you have your bank account, which is again works on the master slave architecture or web 2.0 architecture, which is, you're the bank maintains your bank accounts, right? They maintain, they control the bank accounts. So let's assume, you get hacked. The bank maintains the KYC ML, or they maintain the information of all the account holders. And so if a hacker steals funds from your account and transfers into another account, you can easily go to the bank and they can track down the hacker, right? Because they maintain the real identity of each one of those accounts. But the identity on the blockchain or the identity on the Bitcoin, it's pseudo-anonymous. So what do I mean by pseudo-anonymous? Although it's transparent, so transparent as in, let's assume public key A transferred one Bitcoin to public key B. So everyone can see, okay, everyone can see that public key A transferred one Bitcoin to public key B, but no one knows who the real owners are of public key A and who the real owner is of public key B. So in that sense, there's no mapping between the real identity of the users and the pseudo-anonymous identity on the Bitcoin network or the blockchain network. So what do I mean by that? That's the first difference. The second difference is around reversibility. So if let's assume you made a wrong transaction through your bank account, you can go to the bank and say, hey, I made this wrong transaction, like, can you reverse that for me? And because they maintain and control the database, they can easily reverse that sort of transaction. But on a blockchain network, because it's decentralized, there's no bank involved, there's no central authority involved, the transactions are irreversible. So if I do a transaction, it's impossible to like reverse that transaction again. It's done for the day. And that's why the recovery and inheritance becomes so important, because let's assume you gave me a private key, or I get hold of the private keys which had Bitcoins. Number one, you won't be able to trace me down that I was the one who stole your Bitcoins, because I'm pseudo-anonymous. You don't know who owns that public key through which the funds got transferred. And then the second is the transactions are irreversible, so you cannot get those funds back. And that's why the backing up and inheritance of these digital assets are so important. So problems, I think I have judged most of them. So if you see how the backup of these digital assets like Bitcoins and more other digital assets itself is done today, is they keep it on a cloud storage, something like AWS. You keep your Bitcoin private keys on AWS, on a Google Drive. People do this. Like I'm not kidding. Even people with like 1 Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoins. A Bitcoin today is worth about $50,000. So people that keeps that sort of amount in like online services. But the thing is, you could be hit with a malware attack. You could be hit with a phishing attack. Anyone else can probably access that. What if the cloud provider on whom you are trusting with, they go rogue and they actually kind of get access those private keys? You never know. And that's how it's not the most optimal way to do it. The second way that people resort to backing up their digital assets is they write it down on a piece of paper to keep it offline. So again, to prevent against remote attack, they write it down on a piece of paper and store it in a safe place, something like a bank vault. But it faces from two data security problems. So first is data loss. What if someone bombs the vault, or what if you lose access to that safe place? So that's the data loss problem. And the second is data theft problem. What if someone steals from that safe location, my digital asset? So both of these problems are not solved in this case. The third way that people resort to today is take that piece of information or their digital asset and then basically like make n number of copies or clones of that piece of information and store it in different places. Now that solves your data loss problem, because it's highly unlikely that you lose all of the copies of your digital asset or your data, but it does not solve your data theft problem. In fact, it increases your data theft problem, because now the hacker or the thief has all of these different locations to access, and if they can compromise any one of those locations, your digital asset is compromised. So not the most optimal way. The last way that people resort to today is they take that piece of information and then they make n number of copy, n number of splits of that piece of information, basically data splitting, and then keep each of those parts into each of n different locations. Now that solves the data theft problem, because for a hacker or thief to compromise your digital asset, um, they need to gather all of the different parts of that information and they need to compromise all of the different location, which is practically impossible. But it does not solve the data loss problem, because even if you as a user lost one of the pieces of that information, you have now incomplete piece of information, and so your digital asset is sort of worthless because you cannot recover it yourself. And so all of these different methods are sort of not the optimal way, and all of these have a single point of failure. And that's why we thought there might be a better way, and that's why we built Cypherock X1, which is sort of world's first offline and decentralized key management solution without a single point of failure. So how this operates is you have these cards, as you can see, and this is sort of a dongle or called as X1 wallet. So the cards are called sidecards and the wallet is sort of X1 wallet. The X1 wallet has a screen and a joystick, and it is used for computation, you can say, for doing the computation around the digital assets. And these cards are used as storage. So these cards have the same level of security as your bank cards or your debit cards and credit card. We use the same hardware, so the same level of security, but it has our own custom designed application that runs, or the software that runs inside this. So, well, how does this work? So pretty simple how this works. You type in your sensitive information or your digital asset into the device and set a unique pin. Then you tap the 4 cards that you saw on the last slide one by one, and through the NFC, it gets the information gets transferred. And what you do is you distribute these 4 cards into 4 different locations. So on the back end, how this is working out is you use something called as cryptographic threshold schemes, and we use something called as tamper-proof hardware. So cryptographic threshold schemes again is part of cryptography, and tamper-proof hardware is what the cards are, which is having secure hardware. So secure hardware is not your typical Arduino or normal hardware that you use for college projects. It's a specialized kind of hardware. The kind of like the best possible secure hardware today are called secure elements. So secure elements are like specialized hardware, specialized secure hardware, which is found in devices probably you use every day. Things like your iPhone, Android devices, your bank cards. These have these specialized chips for storing very sensitive pieces of information. And so how this works is like when you enter your sensitive information into the device, it generates 4 secrets using the cryptographic threshold scheme. 4 secrets which gets generated out of the sensitive information or a digital asset, and it gets transferred. Each of those 4 secrets gets transferred into each one of the 4 cards by tapping your card onto the device. Now these cards are NFC cards, and so through the NFC the secrets are transferred, and what you do with these cards is you distribute them into 4 different remote locations. That's all you need to do as a user. Now let's assume in the future you want to recover back your sensitive information. The magic here is you don't need to fetch all of these 4 cards. The magic here is you only need to fetch any 2 out of these 4 cards. So any 2, let's assume you fetch the first and the third card, you tap it back again onto the hardware and enter your pin that you had set earlier, and then it shows back your original information. So I'm going to repeat again just for clarity purposes. You don't need to fetch all of the 4 cards. You just need to fetch any 2 cards. So any 2 cards, you fetched it, you tap it back again, enter the pin that you had set, and it displays back your original Bitcoins, digital asset, password, private key, whatever you are storing through the product. Few of the things to note here. Number 1, there is nothing that is stored in the X1 wallet. So even if you lost that hardware, you can buy another one from us and you will be able to recover it from the 2 cards. That's it. Second is how it solves the data loss and that data theft problem. So how it solves the data loss problem is even if you lost any 2 cards out of the 4, you still have the remaining 2 cards to recover your funds. So that's how it solves the data loss problem. The second is the data theft. How it solves the data theft problem is, even if a hacker gets access to, I need two cards, without him having, so the hacker, if the hacker needs to hack through your funds or your digital assets, he needs to have access to at least two cards and the pin. Without these sorts of cards and the pin, it's impossible for the hacker to actually get hold of your funds. So that's how we sort of have designed it. It's sort of world's first device of its kind. We have already pre-sold multiple products, people who have already paid for this product from 5 different countries. We are currently right now in private beta, so we are currently testing the security aspects of things, and then eventually we'll ship it out globally. So use case, I'm not going to go too much deeper into use case, but it's more like you can use this product for storing anything that is highly valuable but needs passive storage. So you don't need it too often. It's like, what if you have the Coca-Cola trade secret or the Coca-Cola formula? Well, how do you secure it? I would say, our product is sort of like the best way to secure the Coca-Cola's formula, right? Because a Coca-Cola formula is also like worth billions of dollars, if not less, right? And the best way to do it is not having a single point of failure in storing that formula. And then obviously you can have other digital assets, your private keys, passwords, bitcoins, obviously, stuff like that. So the three is around hardware security. So we, again, although we are focused more around the cryptocurrency and the blockchain space in itself, we are sort of like, we want to grow sort of like the hardware security ecosystem in India. And if we see like security in general, we see like there are three E's, the problem of three E's in India around hardware security. The first is the lack of ecosystem, there's a lack of education, and there's a lack of encouragement. So what I mean by this is, we don't have the ecosystem today, and that's what we want to have it develop over time, which is, it's always going to take time to develop the ecosystem. And if you see even the work today that is done around hardware security, most of the work is done, or security in general, let's not talk about hardware security specifically, but security in general, most of the work, or I should call it the action, the work where the action is done around in US and Europe. And generally just the work of testing and debugging is passed on in India. And that's why we don't have that sort of ecosystem that's growing around, and we need more and more companies venturing into the security ecosystem to actually grow that out. And this becomes widely more important now, because if you consider India and countries all over, there's a sense of awareness now around national security. And the third world war, as we can see it, it's not going to be around physical, it's always going to be cyber war that's going to be there. And if there's going to be a cyber war, that's predicted, I hope that does not happen, but if that's predicted, every country will prioritize having local grown security companies. And that's where I feel there's a lot of opportunity in the next 5-10 years to actually work in the security space, specifically if your aim is to like kind of build around in India. The second is lack of education. So education itself, what we have seen, in fact, I graduated in 2018 myself. We barely like teach security in India, to be really honest. And I feel there is need to be having more and more initiatives around, the growing ecosystem. The universities around India should partner up with, Indian grown organizations and non-profits like, nullcon. So the null community is sort of, one of the biggest security like communities out there. So I think, there should be active participation for both stakeholders to actually grow the ecosystem around security. And the third is sort of like lack of encouragement. I wouldn't like comment too much on this, but it's more like, there's focus on, I mean, if you see traditionally India is more sort of, how should I say, like the outsourced tech hub of the world. So anything that needs to be built, the capital gets raised in US, Europe, but the work is, the labor is sort of done in India. That's how the model is right now, and that's why we have too much talent around e-commerce. We have too much talent around website development, application development, but we barely have focus and talent around like these core. I mean, it's obviously increasing, but still, if you see like the comparison between them is that there's a stark difference between them. So I would say, like, to sort of like innovate on these sort of front end, we need to have, I mean, more encouragement from like the stakeholders, from the government stakeholders, to actually like encourage people to go into the space. So yeah, I mean that's about it. I would say in the end, like what we are trying to do as a company is, I'm sure everyone has heard about Internet of Things, which is, you have to have a sensor built into every sort of use case that a user does today. But where we want to position ourselves is we want to become the leader of Internet of Things, OFF of Things, which is, some of the things needs to be off the internet, needs to be secure, needs to be private, and we want to like sort of develop world's first products around that sort of a theme, wherein, because you have these digital assets. I mean, the more exposure you have those digital assets to the internet, the more chance there is of them getting hacked. And you need these sort of devices and products to keep them off the internet, and that's what we intend to go about it. Over to you, Gaurav. Thank you so much. And
Thank
yeah,
you, Rohan.
open for, I'm open for questions. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really a session which has covered, I think, starting with the basic introduction about the cryptography, then a quite sniff into your hardware wallets kind of thing. So before opening to the question, few questions I will pose. Rohan, is the first thing that nowadays there is lot of hue about this curve 25519,
Mhm.
which is basically used for this encryption of WhatsApp encryption. People came to know, but I think people are also using it for the hardware, hardware security. So what's your say on that?
I mean, see, encryption itself. So there is the encryption itself. I mean, like I'll talk more generally about it. The thing is,
Mm,
it's always an ever evolving space, right?
mm,
And the thing with this is, you have quantum, which is on the corner right now, and with the promise of quantum, what the quantum, if everything goes, according to its way, it will
mm,
probably break many of the systems that we have today, right? And there needs to be like focus around, rather than focusing around like encryption algorithm that we have existing today. We should be having focus around future proofing those sorts of risks. So
mm,
there are already work getting done around, focused on, I think there is one algorithm by Lagrange himself, which has, I think, digital signature algorithm that is quantum proof. So
mm.
um, it's like, before the catastrophe arises, I think it's more like, let's focus on the prevention rather than be focused on the care when it actually happens, right? So
Mm,
coming to hardware security in general, obviously, like encryption, it does play a big part there. But the way hardware security is done about is, you have these specialized chips, wherein most of the, how should I say, most of the configurations inside the hardware are kept like a close guarded secret. And if you like work in the hardware security domain, most of the times, if you have to like deal with these secure hardware, you have to sign an NDA with the manufacturer to be
correct.
able to access the data sheets of those hardware. And that's why, it's a different space altogether. Encryption, again, like it does play well and obviously has its use in both cases, but hardware security is more around, I should say, it's like more around, as I said, focused on tackling security issues at rest. And
Mm.
encryption is more towards around, or should say, like focus around tackling issues with related to the assets in motion. That's sort of how I would like categorize the difference between them.
Correct. And second was this whenever this curve 25519 was launched, and when WhatsApp says comes up with the policy of end-to-end encryption. So
Mhm.
even when they say end-to-end encryption, even WhatsApp also could not see that. Now,
Right.
but if you see the forensics teams getting into this all kind of crime act, they could able to retrieve your information even if you delete that. Then how sort of this thing works when we talk about end-to-end encryption? Any idea or thought process on that?
Yeah, so I think this could be like broken down into two. So one is obviously, whether the company is being ethically right about those practices.
Correct.
That's
Hmm.
number one, right? And the number two is whether the implementation is sort of correctly. I mean, whether the encryption, or if it's an end-to-end encryption, whether it's actually implemented correctly or not. Now, I'm not pointing fingers at WhatsApp. Whether, I mean, obviously they have the world's best engineers working with them, and I wouldn't say that they have a problem with their implementation, but and again, I wouldn't even comment on their ethical nature, because the thing is they have a lot in their stake. So if someone finds out, okay, they're not behaving ethically, they can be sued big time in billions of dollars,
Correct.
right? But I would say it's still a trust issue, and there is a reason why apps like Signal have rose to prominence, because it's open source, so if anyone can audit it. They can have their own instances run around their Signal implementation, and they are kind of they actually care about the privacy, right? So it's to be honest, very debatable what the real nature of the
Correct.
consequences will be. But I'm seeing a trend towards things moving towards privacy focused first, right? And that's why you have even the WhatsApp's original co-founder now funding and being co-founder of Signal itself, rather than supporting his own WhatsApp, right? So
That's fine. That's fine. So, guys, those who are present, we are having collaboration with Cypherock from at least an year now. We are moving towards the second stage where we get the few stuff from the Cypherock and we try to break that stuff down. So, we are looking for a passionate student who wants to build a career in the domain of hardware, wallet, security, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and all that stuff. So over to you guys. If you have any questions, you can pose it to Rohan. Any questions, guys?
Um, I'd like to ask, like, what
For name,
what does
name.
cyber security part plays role into these wallets? Like, how does the process goes at the back end side?
yeah, so as I said, like it's more around. So I mean, personally for us, obviously we are focused around cyber security in general, but the branch that we are actively involved in is more around hardware security. And the reason for that is these private keys, as I said, of these bitcoins and other digital assets, or even let's assume your password. Well, how do you secure it in the best way possible, right? Because if you, let's assume, and I'll say, sort of point this out, that even the authentication of today, I think it's going to be changed in the next 10 years, at least for the um, most like valuable network. So I'll like give it an example for that. So just like Facebook, you use Facebook, you authenticate it, you type in your password, but I don't see it as the safest way to do it, and that's why people use 2FA too often. But what I see personally in the next 10 years is like the authentication happening at the user's end rather than the browser, because the thing is, with the browser, you can have a keylogger, you can have a phishing attack, you can have all those sorts of things. And and if you guys don't know, I mean, if you know about dark web, so on a dark web, if you want to hack someone's Gmail account, a Gmail's account's password is worth only about $90 today. So if you want to hack someone's Gmail account, you just need to pay a hacker on the dark web about $90, and you'll get his password. And think of all of the different services, or even the bank accounts today are linked through your email account, right? So think of the value that is accrued through your Gmail account, and that's only costing someone else to about $90, which is not even 7,000 rupees, to hack through all of those services. So eventually, I think at least for the most secured networks, or applications that someone uses, we'll have user based authentication rather than a browser based authentication. That's one. Secondly, as I said, we are focused more around digital assets in general, and how do we secure that private key against two sorts of attacks. So one is the remote attack, which is what, remotely, not someone is not able to hack the bitcoins or any other digital asset. And secondly is physical attack. So even if you get hold of those cards, well, how do you protect against the hacker accessing the private key that is stored inside it, right, from stealing the bitcoins to that. So these two sort of different sorts of attacks are, where we focus on in terms of our product.
Right. So all the data of every user that accesses this wallet would be stored somewhere in your like storage
No, no, no,
uh,
no. So
database thing,
again,
right?
as I said, this is not a centralized solution. It's not like this is our hardware that we have, and then users give their digital assets to us. It's not. That's not how it works. It's like this is a product that you buy from us, and those digital assets are stored by you on this product, and then you can keep these cards in 4 different locations and however you might like to have it. And we as a company, we won't be able to compromise your digital assets. We won't be able to see this because it's all private and decentralized. We don't control access to these devices as per se.
Oh, okay. Right. Got it.
Because obviously there's a risk. What if we stole your digital assets, right? And we don't want to have, I mean, that's not the promise of the company, right? Otherwise, what's the point in having a decentralized solution?
Right.
So that's why the decentralized solutions are proven to be more secure, is it?
Right, exactly.
Any questions, guys? So we would be circulating the Google form through which we would be, sorting out the passionate student who wants to work with this collaboration, what we have with Rohan, and we will be lining up the events or the what you can say the processes that we need to carry, and surely within short time we can able to achieve more with the suppository. Yeah, Shubham, go ahead.
Hi Rohan, this is Shubham from third year. First of all, thanks for the great presentation. I really like the concept of Cypherock and I'm really looking forward to own a card as soon as possible. Coming to my question is what challenges did you face while incubating your startup, considering it is a cryptocurrency hardware wallet and the notion of cryptocurrencies in India right now, it's like if we go around and ask people, 9 out of 10 will reply that cryptocurrency is illegal in India and we don't want to fall for that risky trap. So yeah, what challenges did you face while incubating the startup? And a follow-up question, in my knowledge, you guys are based in India. So, what are your plans or options if government in case bans cryptocurrencies? Because in my opinion, government which can ban 500 1000 rupee notes overnight can definitely ban cryptocurrencies with a blink of eye. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So good questions. Firstly, let's first tackle the first one, which is the challenges. So I'll tell you, man, there are too many challenges because as I said, it's not something which is it's not an Android app, right? It's not a website that you can like spin it up in 5 days, a week,
Mhm.
right? These are like complex technologies. So as I said, I mean two sorts of let's consider two sorts of challenges. So one challenge which is which you were talking about are more from the regulatory perspective. So in that sense, I mean, to be honest, so the analogy I like to give here is we are sort of making the bottles for the alcohol, right? So even if the alcohol gets banned, that does not mean the bottle gets banned because the same bottle can be used for storing other stuff.
काय काम meeting? काय काम meeting? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as I said, like we make the bottle. So how we in fact market out the product eventually, if the government go towards the ban, is we market out as secure pen drives in India, which you can use it to secure other digital assets. Now, again, if even if you see pen drive, so people can obviously store illegal stuff in there too. People can store pirated stuff, and that,
Mhm.
like technical speaking, that's also sort of illegal, right? But no one can sort of regulate that, right? And that's how we our stances around regulatory perspectives also. So the government goes with the banning of the cryptocurrencies, number one, although they won't be able to enforce it, we won't be having that sort of an issue around having an existential crisis in the country, to be very honest. So that's more around this. The real challenges that we faced were more around hiring, getting to the right people. Those sorts of were the real challenges, and then obviously fundraising itself. So people, again, it's hard to explain people what we do because most of the investors don't understand it. Right now there has been some action now, so people are trying to like spend time to understand this whole technology, but before, like 3 years 5 years before,
Mm-hmm.
it was much more difficult. So it's changing, but it's obviously going to take time. In any case, for us, where we sort of why we left our jobs was, the whole motivation for us was to build in India but for the world, right? So we wanted to build world's first products from India. I mean, if you see the history of internet, Amazon started in 1992, but Flipkart got started in 2006. The difference is starting, right? And I wouldn't blame India for that because we didn't have the internet infrastructure before, but we now have that sort of infrastructure, and we know in real time what the West is working on, and the West is right now working on crypto and AI, right? And because we know in real time what they're working on, we can compete them on building those world's first products rather than trying to play a catch around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how we have with Flipkart. And what was the second question?
What challenges did you face while incubating? But I think you already answered that pretty well too.
Yeah.
So yeah, just one more last question. Are you guys live yet? Can we actually sort of buy the Cypherock cards and wallets?
We are sort of in a pre-order stage. So one thing that is also happening right now is Indian Customs has started seizing hardware wallets from foreign countries because of potential crypto ban or whatever. And so sort of we have a local monopoly in India. So no one apart from us makes any hardware wallets. In terms of our progress, we are right now in private beta. So we are actively testing out the product with some of our selected customers. But anyone can right now pre-order. The product is going to go live in next 1 or 2 months for anyone to like place the order and receive it real time. Right now we are in the pre-order stage.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rohan, for the insight. And I really like the Cypherock card. I'm really looking to buy one. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, guys, any other question?
Hello, Rohan. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your, the time. I know you are going live in 1.5 month. So I wish that you remain the de facto standard for hardware wallet in times to come.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Saurabh.
So
Thanks, everyone.
yeah, thank you, Bidway sir. Thank you, team. Thank you, students. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rohan sir. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.